Well, thank you, Ben, and ladies and gentlemen. The 21st century has been the century of technological evolution. Technology has become the basis for overturning dictatorships, protesting wrongs, mobilizing, campaigning, politicking, but it has also unfortunately on occasion become the basis of misinformation, riots, and violence. Big tech has become intertwined with democracy. And globally, sovereignty is being pitted against big tech. And as each country begins setting new safeguards to ensure that democracy thrives with technology and does not succumb to it, India's story has also been remarkable. India's Union Minister for Law and Justice, Communications, Electronics, and Information Technology, one of the senior most politicians in the ruling coalition, is leading from the front. He has been very, very agile in his approach. As a former party spokesperson for the BJP, he's also been very outspoken in his views. He's been very bold, sometimes controversial in his decisions to safeguard India's democracy. And today it is my privilege to invite Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, Union Minister for Law, Justice, Communications, Electronics, and IT, to first deliver his keynote to our forum on the theme of big tech and democracy, the global policy challenge. Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, thank you for joining the India Global Forum. Everyone's very excited to hear your views. And over to you now. Over to you, Mr. Prasad. Thank you.
My very good friend, Arnav Goswami, good friend, Manoj Ladwa, and all the friends of the India Forum, which has become a very prestigious group. I have been appearing in their program for many years. All of you go from strength to strength. Arnav, what are my initial comments? Very briefly, I can share with you and for the friends in London who are listening to me. India's digital story is a remarkable story. I remember when our leader, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, was contesting to win the office of Prime Minister as the leader of the NDA and the BJP in 2014, he gave a vision. If I'm elected to power, I'll create an India where IT plus IT is equal to IT. He explained that IT, India's talent, plus IT, information technology, is equal to IT, India tomorrow. That's the vision he gave. And I'm very happy to tell you that we launched the Digital India movement on the 1st of July 2015, 6 years down the line. What have been the achievement? I would like to briefly recount, and also other issues which surely you are going to ask. To my friends, Arnav, you need to know that India population 1.3 billion, India home to 1.29 billion Aadhaar card, digital identity to supplement the physical identity, backed by a law with due regard to privacy. India is home to 1.18 billion phones, out of which 100 million plus are mobile phones. India is home to 750 million smartphones, moving computers. And India is nearly 750 million internet connections. That is the profile of India. How Digital India has worked on the ground. And I would like to briefly share with you when I outline Digital India in very simple words. Digital India means a program to empower ordinary Indians with the power of technology, bridge the digital divide, and most important, bring in digital inclusion for the poor, for the underprivileged. Or now, just to tell you few statistics, we opened bank account 400 million of the poor, linked with the Aadhaar, the digital identity, with duly marked with mobile phone, and started sending all the welfare measures directly to their bank account, known as DBT, Direct Benefit Transfer. We transferred close to just to tell you, to 27 billion US dollars. And you know how much we have saved or no? $24 billion, which is to be pocketed by middlemen and fictitious claimants. India has one of the cheapest internet in the world. India has given a big movement to digital payment movement. Today it is e-visa, or 1,000 mandis, markets are linked with the e-national agriculture portal, e-education, e-health. During COVID, I don't know, you'll be happy to know that the entire country, no train movement, no rail movement, plane movement, no highway movement. It is my three departments, communication, IT, and your postal department, which helped the country grow together by having work from home, etc. in a big way. 90% IT operations continued uninterrupted. India has one of the biggest startup movement in the world, or no, I'm happy to tell you. India has 50,000 startups, the third biggest in the world. And there were only 4 unicorns earlier. That means a company having 1 billion turnover. Now there are 51 unicorns in India. Young people changing the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem. India has electronic manufacturing, just 2 mobile factories in 2014. Now India has 260 mobile factories. All the biggest mobile manufacturers have come to India. And the rise in FDI, this year we received $26 billion FDI in computer, hardware, etc., etc. Therefore, from digital delivery of services to digital skilling to digital empowerment, to my friends who are listening to me, I was very keen that Digital India must become a mass movement. Nearly 400,000 common service centers, CSC, are situated in hinterland of India, giving digital delivery of services. Apart from education, to making your passport, to taking care of your land records, I have also used them or no for pre-litigation advice to poor people. And 900,000 harassed mother-in-law or a wage earner having a problem or someone having a problem have been given legal advice by assigned lawyers to this whole platform. Therefore, I can only say India has made a mark in terms of digital inclusion, the shining symbol of Digital India, apart from delivery, empowerment, scaling, manufacturing, etc. I'm very happy to also share with you, India has become one of the biggest country to host all these social media platforms. Or now, WhatsApp users in India are 530 million. YouTube users are 448 millions. Facebook users 410 million. Instagram users 210 million. And Twitter users nearly 18 million. They're welcome to do business in India. They have empowered ordinary people of the country. They ask questions. They ask questions from Arnab Goswami, they ask questions from me. At times they are very rabid, but India, being a democracy, allows complete freedom to ask questions. And let me categorically say on this platform that they can criticize Ravi Shankar Prasad, they can criticize my Prime Minister, full freedom. They can ask any questions. But we were and these big tech companies are having big business in India. I have no problem. Make money in India, earn money in India. But there was one issue or no I would like to flag to you. The issue was not of use of social media. The issue was one of abuse and misuse of social media. What should I do when a harassed mother used to come to me? The ex-boyfriend of her daughter is making all their intimate photographs viral. What should I do when a lady complains that my morphed image is being circulated, recirculated? What should I do when a journalist or a businessman, I am being harassed, defamed on groundless basis? And what should I do when messaging on WhatsApp was being circulated and recirculated to inflame passion for terrorism, for riot, etc. These were the issues which we had to address. And therefore, the issue is not of use of social media. The issue is one of abuse and misuse of social media. They can criticize, most welcome, India is a democracy. But this issue had to be addressed because ultimately, Arnav, as a Minister of India, I'm also accountable to the people of India. That's very important. And there were 2 Supreme Court judgments asking us to take action. Now even judges are being told, you know that. There is a question of checking out some person. Even eminent journalists have been kicked out of a particular platform based upon their own unilateral ex parte assessment of the comments, etc., etc. Thereafter, wider consultations took place, and we have come these guidelines. What these guidelines say, very simply, Arnav, if you are a significant social media intermediary, namely you are having a user base of 5 million plus, you must set up in India a grievance redressal officer based in India whom people can approach in the event they have a complaint to make. You must have a compliance officer who must report in public domain every month that these complaints came, these we have addressed. And you must have a nodal person with whom the law enforcement agencies can contact. Arnav, in the course of implementing these guidelines, which have become operational with effect from 26th of May after expiry of 3 months grace period, I have noticed one thing, and this I would like to share, and I would like to have your questions also. Some of them say we are bound by American laws. Okay? That raises the larger question. You operate in India. You make good money in India. You have good ad revenue in India. But you will take the position that I will only be governed by laws of America. If a harassed woman has to complain, they will say, go to America. This is plainly not acceptable. You are free to do your business in India, but you have to be accountable to India's constitution and India's laws. And all of these digital platforms operate digitally. Welcome. They have a global reach. Welcome. But you have to have a harmonious relationship between the autonomy of these digital platforms and the obligation of an independent sovereign nation like India, governed by the constitution, or any other nation of the world, which is a democracy. Therefore, this is the real challenge which I will unfold. I am very clear about it. Let me conclude. Repeat, we appreciate social media. They have empowered people. They have enabled them to ask questions. They have made the governing people accountable. At times they come with fake news, etc. We need to address them. But the larger issue is, which law governs you? To whom are you accountable? And if democracy has to go or no, accountability is important. Arnav Goswami asks questions daily. People look towards every evening to see your questions, and that you have been an extraordinary kind of a symbol in the country of asking questions. Therefore, if questions are asked, they're applicable to all. Accountability is important. Therefore, digital sovereignty, democracy, dissent, the ability to ask questions, and for social media also to be accountable. This is the larger debate when you talk of big tech and democracy. Those are my very initial comments. Well, wonderful meeting you again.
Well, thank you, Mr. Prasad. Thank you. You have put it across wonderfully. And by the way, congratulations on the 6th anniversary of Digital India.
Thank you.
I think through the time that you have been holding this very important portfolio, we've seen all those strides. And you've shared many numbers people are aware of. And the number of users in India has transformed manyfold in the last, should I say, 7 years almost of the Modi government. And that's one of the biggest achievements of the Modi government, and the whole world looks at India for that reason. So many, many congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Prasad, you have also raised many issues, which in a way I would say, and the audiences would appreciate that these are very critical, because Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad is both India's Minister for Law and Justice, as well as Communications, Electronic and IT. And whether we like it or not, there has been an sort of enmeshing or a hybrid nature of these two ministries of late. I'm sure sometimes I want to ask you whether you are putting out a statement as law minister or as IT minister. And I think most of the tech giants would also want to know that. Mr. Prasad, see, some of the issues you raised in your opening remarks are actually global issues. And this is the challenge globally. You have common shared values: democracy, right to information, right to campaign, right to protest, right to report on the one side. But then there are also new issues which are coming up of national interest, sovereignty, the phrase which you used, our digital sovereignty. We cannot be sovereign unless we are digitally sovereign as well. So big tech, Mr. Prasad, has permeated nations across the globe. The issues you are raising as a minister today are dealt with by governments across the globe. And the biggest issue is that a handful of big tech platforms have a lot of concentrated power and ability to influence audiences. When they hold that remarkable ability, you expect them to be compliant on their own. But on the other hand, whenever convenient, they say, well, we are only intermediaries. We are only technology platforms. We are not the content creators. But as technology evolves, reaches more people, has a growing impact across nations, what does it mean at a larger level for safeguarding democracy?
No, that's a very good question. Let me elaborate it. I'm so happy you have asked me this question at the very outset. These tech companies, I must acknowledge, have contributed in the expansion of digital footprint globally. They've empowered people globally. At a click of a button, I can know what is happening in Latin America sitting in Delhi, or in Patna, or you sitting in Guwahati. That's good. They operate in an ecosystem where geographical boundaries disappear. They have innovated, they have expanded, they have empowered. Point well taken. But the larger question is, are you a platform or you are a regulator? Or no, that's a very important question you have flagged. Because if you are a platform, you allow views to be accessed and also exchanged. But if you start dictating your own terms and norms, I can understand or no. If palpably terrorist messages are being exchanged, or a woman is being shown nude, or say there are issues about child sexual abuse, these are important issues. You must take action. But let me ask a counter question. If a riot is happening or no, you say my system is encrypted. I'm not asking you to open that encrypted system. But Arnav, with a very wide experience, can you deny when riot happens on the same day, around the same time, in the same geographical area, and lots of very explosive material is circulated and recirculated, whose content are all publicly known? What happens if some messages, very inflammatory, are sent from across the border? Do the platform have some responsibility or not? The allied issue is also very important. Democracy is based upon the voluntary choice of the people in a country. I can take that name. Cambridge Analytica pilfered about, I remember even coming on your show on that issue, large number of data of Facebook. I had to order a tough inquiry by the investigating agencies, and the company got closed. That data belonged to Indians. Therefore, there can be many shades. And the larger issue is, I'm very happy they have kept the issue for dialogue between you and me, big tech and democracy. There are authoritarian regimes who promote their own cause and put people behind bars for years together. But here is a democracy. If democracy is to survive, misinformation, fake news, explosive materials, I would say colluded material, all these are challenges. I am not in favor of censoring, I should be very clear to you all. But democracies have to find a common ground as far as these issues are concerned, so that these big tech companies do their business, earn good money, good profit, but become accountable. And this can only happen if they learn to follow the laws of the land, namely the country in which they operate.
The question, and you have put the laws of the land out there under your newly notified Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code 2021, both technologically and legally. But Mr. Prasad, the argument of democracy is used against you. Those who are content digital players say that there is no need. In fact, they say that as per the rules of the free market, we must be allowed to operate freely. They say that the technology sector has to be treated differently from, for example, non-technology sectors in which you need greater democracy, greater freedom. And we must be ready for a little bit of collateral damage, because the pros are too many and the cons are too few. Depends on whether you look at the glass as half full or half empty. You will say that big tech is a source of information, or you will say it is a source of amplification of misinformation. And they say that there is no way in which any government can force any technology company to have complete control over the messages on their system. And hence, therefore, this becomes a growing battle. For example, Twitter refuses to comply with the IT rules. The IT rules cite a complaint under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to threaten suspension of account to your Twitter account. But the same Twitter refuses to comply with your rules. So at the end of the day, Mr. Prasad, how will you step in? They say we are an American company. We respect American rules. But you said they operate in India. Can you force them to comply with Indian rules?
My reply is very simple, Arna. Very simple. When an Indian IT company go to do business in America, do they follow American laws or not? Indian IT companies are present in 200 cities of 80 countries, but substantially in America. When Indian pharma company go to do business in UK or USA, do they follow the laws of UK or USA? Not. Very clearly, they do follow. Now, tech companies cannot arrogate to themselves that I will only be bound by the laws of America, though I will earn money from India, and show in my shareholders that I have 400 million plus our subscribers in India. That is the first question. The second question is, I do take your point or no, that technology displaces. Technology creates new conditions. But since you are talking about the rights of the big tech companies, what about the rights of the victims of abuse? That question is important. Do they have some rights or not? Arnab Goswami, when he sits on his news channel, a popular news channel in India, you are bound by certain obligations or not. Though you are watched globally, there is media council, there your in-house system is there. There is press council for the print media. Globally in America or England, there is joint appeal by many leaders. The larger issue is that there has to be a harmonious balance. That is very important. And the reply cannot be that we'll only be governed by American laws. Now, since you asked me that question or no, I never tried to mention anything concerning me, but since you have mentioned it, they blocked my Twitter account for 1 hour.
Yeah.
And you know what reasons they gave? 4 years ago, I had tweeted on the great Bangladesh victory of 1971, in which Lieutenant General Arora was taking surrender from the Pakistani forces. It was the celebration of that great victory. And behind that, that great song of A.R. Rahman, Ma Tujhe Salam, Vande Mataram was being played. It is on Facebook and all. After 4 years, suddenly they say, we had some complaint. And the complainant made a public statement in Economic Times. Sorry, we had no concern. Let them have the copyright of that. What is this? I always say, if you are going to invoke the Millennium Digital Copyright of America, you have to be also cognizant of the copyright rules of India. That is the point. Because tweet was made in India. You cannot say my whole stand will be regulated by an ex parte assessment of a US law. That is the point, or no? Again, I don't want to...
You think Twitter targeted you selectively?
No. As far as targeting part is concerned, the shoulders of Ravi Shankar Prasad are too broad. Okay, no problem. I don't even mind criticism, even from Twitter itself. But the point is, I'm on a larger question or no. And the larger question is, if democracy and big tech company have to survive, I have not the slightest doubt. Globally, all the companies, be it countries, be it USA, be it UK, be it South Africa, be it France, be it European Union, or are Australia grappling with this issue, democracies. True. And the issue is, how do you synergize your digital operations globally with the digital sovereignty of respective nations? And for a happy blending of the role of big tech and democracy, a solution has to be found.
Mr. Prasad, we've seen a trend where Article 19(1)(a), freedom of expression, speech, is used very liberally to defend any provocation, instigation, misinformation on social media and high-tech platforms. As a well-known lawyer and now as law minister, you have been one of the strongest voices defending Article 19(1) and the right of the ordinary citizens. Do you consider this modus operandi of theirs valid? And it may be 19(1)(a) here in India, but broadly, you see, whenever you talk about amplification of misinformation, the counter argument is dissent, freedom of expression, and just by way of a comparison to UK. Last December, we saw that in UK, they were proposing laws whereby platforms like Facebook and Twitter were liable to face fines up to 10% of their turnover if they fail to remove and limit the spread of illegal content, such as what you mentioned, child sexual abuse or terrorist material. India has similar laws. We are not doing, in fact, we are not even thinking of something as strong as is being thought about in the United Kingdom. So why is it then that the narrative in India is that dissent is in danger?
Oh no, that is unfortunate. But those who raise this issue have got the right to raise this issue. Or no, do you know something very interesting? In India, we are having a very peculiar problem. The biggest campaigner of right to information have become the biggest campaigner of right to privacy. Those who wanted what I write in my files to be known, or what do you decide as an editor of your Republic channel to be known to them, have become the biggest campaigner of right to privacy. That is good luck to them. 19(1), freedom of speech and expression. Granted, allowed, respected by the Constitution. 19(2) is also there. A reasonable restriction can be put in pursuit of sovereignty, integrity of India, security of India, and also defamation, etc. Or now let me ask a very simple question. UK is a great democracy, so is India. Can anyone go before the Indian President's house, Rashtrapati Bhavan, or say before the British Parliament and become completely naked and then start showering abuses to the people? You cannot, because that's the limit of your freedom, decency, propriety. Therefore, whenever people raise the issue of 19(1), dissent, etc., they should also understand that there is a provision of that. Does the right to criticize entail the right to abuse? And again, I will come to the basic question or no. In this whole debate, the victims of abuse angle is completely lost. And if I can give you a good analogy, I have talked to you many times on your channel. People talk of human right, But what about the human right of those who are the victims of terrorism, been killed with impunity? Do they have a human right or not? The same analogy is relevant here. The second issue is again very, very central. I'm wishing to repeat. Which law you want to be governed by? You may have seen a G20 meeting. A decision has been taken that your taxation has to be of a particular level in the country in which you operate. Ultimately, they have the choice of going to tax havens. That is their call. Similarly or no, digital sovereignty is going to become an important element. And digital sovereignty simply means you come, operate in India or in Germany or in France or in Australia or in UK, earn good money, enable people to ask questions, criticize those in power, most welcome, but learn to abide by the laws of the country in which you operate. That is a crucial element of accountability. You cannot say that I will only follow the laws of America and no one else.
What about joining hands globally? Finally, Mr. Prasad, you know, earlier this month there were regulators in Brussels and in the UK. They announced formal competition investigations into Facebook in a joint action on the social media companies' use of customer data, for example, to dominate in core markets. And we are, we also saw German Chancellor Angela Merkel, the Danish Prime Minister, the Estonian Prime Minister, the Finnish Prime Minister, in a joint letter, they said, now is the time for Europe to be digitally sovereign. So these have become global issues. You know, UK and Australia have come up with content regulating laws and bargaining codes. Do you feel the need to collaborate with other countries? Are you already talking to some of your peers elsewhere around the world? Because eventually these companies are global companies, and not just companies. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to have to be values so that nobody can cock a snook, not just at Indian laws. Every country will be defending its own national interests. So do you feel a need to work across borders for a united global approach as well?
Sure, it has to be there. And I'm very happy, from USA to Canada to UK to Australia to European Commission to Germany, everyone is concerned and working in that direction. And we are quite open for a dialogue. We keep on exchanging our notes. But I don't know how I have worked. I think I must share with you in conclusion. Net neutrality was the issue of debate globally. I declared in the Indian Parliament, the right of access of internet is not negotiable. And that remains my commitment. And all these companies know. I'm sorry for mentioning a specific instance. Mark Zuckerberg is a good friend of mine. We have been meeting. He came with the idea of free basics. A big campaign of advertisement was launched in India. When I examined it, I found you will get free everything if you enter through the Facebook gate.
Yeah.
I said, sorry, I will not permit. India is a democracy. India believes in many gates. That's how the stand we have been taking, and many countries are appreciating our stand. But yes, I must conclude with one very firm assurance to all the viewers. We believe in democracy. These social media are welcome to do business in India, earn tons of money in revenue, let their subscribers, users ask questions, criticize Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, Ravi Shankar, the Law Minister, IT Minister, and even anyone else. That is a question of empowering. But you'll have to learn to respect the digital sovereignty of India and the laws of India. That I'm very clear about.
So the nation wants to know at the end, with all these issues, you've been hitting the headlines every few days. Nation wants to know whether you are spending more time in the Law and Justice Ministry office or the IT Ministry these days.
During COVID times, IT Ministry is more comfortable, but I work my all departments from here.
Fantastic. It is such a pleasure. Mr. Prasad, always, such a pleasure to talk to you. And I think some of the issues which you've raised here our global audience will appreciate some of the global issues we have here. It's been really enjoyable to me. And we must work together to make sure technology strengthens our democracy, does not make it more vulnerable. I thank you so much, Mr. Prasad, for joining the India Global Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arnav. Thank you.
So that was Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, not just a long-standing spokesperson for the BJP, or one of the most influential ministers in the Modi government. And I think some of the issues he's raised there will strike a chord among all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you.